Hello, good start. I've been asked by a few people to do a how-to. Everybody's wondering how I managed to paint figures so quickly at the moment, and so I thought, well, I'll do a quick one. Use one of James's new figures he's been making up, so and go through my contrast method of painting. Should be quite quick. Should be quite easy. I'll try and talk through more than I usually do, so this will appear slow, but I'll try and explain everything as I go along. Few quick things to note. I always use white as undercoat, but obviously you can use grey. I've just found that white spray paint is easy to find in B&M or wherever, so that's what I tend to do. Right, the first thing I do, however, for the flesh is not use contrast paint. I use Reikland Flesh Shade. Bit of an experiment. Actually, Tim found that this was a lot better than the normal contrast, which is Guilliman Flesh, which you can use. I don't find gives it the same pigment. And this has been the most revelation thing about contrast, because they just make the faces pop. So what I do, as I say, it might sound like sucking eggs, and if it does, I apologise. But I try and for the sake of thoroughness, I use always an O brush. I don't know which brush you use, but this works best for me. Try and get it like the first quarter, and when you put it on, you've got to almost be brave and really start working it in to the areas, and almost where there is. You can see I've gone back a few times. That's mainly so I'm always in control of how much I've got on my brush. But really work it in. Really make sure that all the recess areas, there's enough paint, because almost that's where the contrast works. The more paint that you can apply to the recesses, the deeper the shade, the deeper the colour, and the more contrast you will get with it. So again, you see, put into the corner, smooth gliding. It's not dabbing, as the youngsters are keen to say, but it's applying it nice, easily and smoothly. Brilliant. Now I always try and paint the biggest areas first, or at least the areas I feel like you need to have that detail. But what I'm going to do is paint red. So I use Flesh Terra Red. Again, same principle. Because I'm covering such a broad area, I've tried to put a little bit more on the brush, mainly because I know I'm going to go back very quickly. But again, nice smooth strokes. Don't also worry at this point about being overtly tidy, but the tidier you can be, the better. And because this chap is a Hanoverian, he's got a red sash. So it will involve painting a lot of red on this figure. Now, where the facing is, try and have an extra bit of care. So we'll just slow down the brush a bit. But of course, let the brush do the work for you. These are the sections where I wish I had video editing software, just to speed up the process for you. But I'm hoping if I show you in real time, it might make it all look a little bit easier as well. And I've chosen to do an officer, mostly because they are quicker to do, but just to show you how the techniques work and how easy it is to achieve an end result. So there we are. You can see already the detail starting to form. As I say, try and do the big surface areas first. And whilst you're shaking, always now I have put ball bearings in the contrast just to help with the process of getting the paint to mix. Now I'm doing white, doing the gaiters, so on this I will be applying it quite heavily. Now even over the white you'd think you need to be a little bit more careful, but no, again, try and get it on as best you can. Quickly check over the model, there's nowhere else that needs it, and that's the white done. Now with contrast, you can, if you wish, leave it as a one coat. I don't think that works. It's there as an aid. The best thing to think about with contrast, Apothecary white, and now I'm using the brown. The one thing I think to think with contrast is use it as something to help, don't use it as something to replace. So I'm still doing a 3-tier painting system when I paint. The major difference being I'm able to do 2 coats at once. Admittedly, in some cases I'm not going over the contrast because I feel you don't need to. So just painting cane. Nice touch this. I must admit, I like officers that don't always have drawn swords. I do try and get officers with muskets or something different. Just gives so much more to a figure. Saves them looking the same upon same upon same. Cool. So you can see, again, the figure's already starting to take shape, and we're only 8 minutes in. So being Hanoverian, he has yellow trousers. So again, same thing. Quarter of the brush full. And on. Now I will point out that I'm kind of cheating doing an officer, because obviously there's not so much to do. There we are. So that's his waistcoat done. Now, the one thing about contrast is they do not work for metallic colours, and there's nothing that you can do to change that. I've tried doing mixing the contrast black with a metallic silver. It doesn't work, and Games Workshop seem unlikely to be releasing anything that is metallic contrast. Not a major problem, because I find metalwork always needs highlighting anyway. I'm sure this is riveting, but I need to be showing you how I'm doing it. So where it's a big area, do just get the brush and do just plaster on is almost the wrong term, but just layer it on. So still take control, still take time. That's why I must admit brushes I think are important, and I do try and use a proper triangle grip just to help you with your control. And as I say, I find the O brush has enough of a point to do detail work, but has enough of a reserve area that really lets you get enough paint on without constantly having to revisit the water pot. Now, the one issue for a traditional painter is that basing, usually you'd undercoat black, and then when you base, that black is never seen because you're putting stuff on it, and black always hides itself. White always shows through. So one downside with contrast is the fact you will have to paint the base, and it is a tad waste of the contrast paint to do it, but for the faff it saves you at the end, basing, it's well worth doing. Perfect. So I'm going to use a metallic gold. No, I'm not. I'm doing highlights. I'm going to use a metallic bronze, because again he's an officer, to do the epaulette. And to do the top of the cane. Good. Right, now it's going to sound daft, but in less than... I'm coming up to about 14 minutes on my timer. In 14 minutes, the first coat, and I will pause this to take some pictures just to show you better, the first coat is done. And if you so wished, that could go on the table. Be back in a second.